Yeah, so Bash at the Beach 1996 took place 2 weeks after King of the Ring, July 7th, 1996, from the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach, Florida, with an announced attendance of 8,300, which, again, with WCW at any era, it was always a question of how many of those people paid.
It didn't look. Yeah, it didn't look like the place was empty at all. So,
now, one thing I want to say right off the bat, they have this brief little opening showing the Outsiders invasion, from like the moment Scott Hall walked out on Nitro back in May of that year, leading up to all the events up to including the pay-per-view, his first confrontation with Sting, then Nash showing up, then power bombing Bischoff through the Great American Bash set, all the confrontations and everything. But one thing you really get the idea of is that WCW's production sucked in comparison to WWE.
You think?
And the bad part about that was that who owned WCW? Turner Broadcasting, a fucking television/sports conglomerate, and they couldn't ever get people who could figure out how to put together decent video packages and stuff like that. It's like, dude, just fucking copy WWF for Christ's sake. I mean, it just comes off as looking so amateurish, and this is and this is the thing that they're leading up to, is saying this is the biggest event in company history, and the hostile takeover.
The production was bad. Yeah.
WCW, and that's something that in a lot of ways they never really improved on, even when they started riding high. So, all right, so they replay, the Bischoff bump, and then there's all this stuff about where is Eric Bischoff, which I'm going to just say, because this became like a recurring theme throughout the night, because everything revolved around the main event match.
So much. Too much.
And the commentary team was Tony Schiavone, Bobby Heenan, and Dusty Rhodes. But they just keep talking about, where's Bischoff? Where's Bischoff? Now, I went back and I played parts of the Nitro the week prior to the event and the Nitro the night after. Bischoff was there for both of those, so it wasn't like he was MIA since he'd gotten powerbombed by Nash. And like the night after this one was the first Nitro, I think the first Nitro that they did from Disney MGM Studios, which was always kind of cool to see, especially if you're a Disney fanatic like me. But again, it was just weird because we know Bischoff eventually turned and joined the NWO, but that didn't happen until November. That was 4 months later, and that was after like the whole build with Roddy Piper when he came in. So why they were making such a big deal out of this during this pay-per-view, especially when Heenan asks Bischoff the next night, Bischoff just like brushes him off, and then it's never really like mentioned again until they get to that point where Bischoff is revealed to be behind the NWO and everything. So it was very odd, and it just didn't age well, knowing how much longer it took to get to that point. It's like if Bischoff had been revealed to be behind the NWO 2 weeks later, then it would have been fine. But otherwise, it just came off as being very, very odd.
It made me think like the whole night, like, is Bischoff gonna like come down to the ring and then like wave some guy down and be to be the third person? They made you think, and then like at the end, it's like nothing. It's like,
yeah, it's like, were they trying to make you think that Bischoff was the third guy?
In some capacity, it was just played very oddly.
Yeah, it was. All right, so the event begins with what more or less became a WCW staple, whether it was an episode of Nitro or a pay-per-view. They'd hit you off right away with some awesome cruiserweight action. Now we've got two of the all-time best here. We got Rey Mysterio Jr. and Psychosis. Mike Tenay joins on commentary as he typically did for the cruiserweight and especially the luchador matches. He always added his 2 cents, which always made it sound a little bit more legitimate. I always liked Mike Tenay as a color guy.
Yeah.
Ray was only 21 years old at the time, and he was so small that he makes Psychosis look like a fucking giant.
Yes, it was really funny.
It was so like, I'm like, wow, Psychosis looks effing huge, and Psychosis is tiny probably compared to me because I'm 6'4" and very overweight. So anyway, so some notes I got from this: there was a really sick looking suicide dive from Psychosis.
And he hits his head.
Ray to the railing where, I think he hit part of his head.
Yep.
Ray would later hit like his feet when he did like the dive to the outside. So
he did like a plancha or whatever and hit his leg on the guardrail.
I'm not sure if they had a good idea of how much space there was between the ring and the railing. Psychosis dominated early. Ray would counter. He hit like his Hurricane Rana a few times. He hit what we now know as the West Coast Pop at one point, but couldn't get the pin. Later on, Psychosis hit what looked like a leg drop to the outside that Tenay called a senton, which, I mean, it looked more like a leg drop than a senton.
It definitely looked more like a leg drop.
There was a really great power bomb counter spot by Psychosis where I think Ray was going for, maybe a flip, and Psychosis powered him up and hit him with the power bomb. The ending occurred, though, when Psychosis was going for, I know they gave it a name, but I'll just call it a top rope razor's edge. But Ray was able to counter into another Hurricane Rana and got the pin. It was a terrific match. It was really edge of your seat, great back and forth, great showcase of skills without them really like overkilling like any moves, without them repeating moves really. I mean, Ray did the Hurricane Rana a couple times, and there wasn't really a lot of ridiculousness to it either. So
he did the Hurricane Rana too many times in my opinion, but that's just me. And they kept, like, I know at that time nobody had really seen anybody do it other than like we saw Scott Steiner do it, but they were like, it was like they were force feeding it. I'm like, okay, I know he can do a Hurricane Rana. I've seen it twice, and then we do it a third time, and then we do it off the top rope. Like, he did it on the apron, then he did it on the top rope, and I'm like, okay, this is a really cool move, but you don't have to do it 4 times in this match.
Yeah.
It's kind of the lucha way then as well.
Yeah. So the match went 15 minutes, 18 seconds. Meltzer gave it 4 3/4 stars.
It's really good. It's a really good match.
No,
I'll just give you the spoiler right now. That's the best match rating he gave to any match on either of these 2 cards.
Not surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have been the best match on either. I mean, there's only one match on the other card that I thought was 4 stars anyway. So
yeah. And now, one quick thing I want to say before. So I'm sorry, Jeremy. This I noticed right away, and this is something that would come back to bite WCW when they ran what was literally their biggest match ever, which was the Hogan Sting title match at Starrcade '97. Every WCW referee has a slow count.
Mm-hmm.
WWF, the counts basically. WCW, if you ever notice, all of their referees kind of cock their wrists.
Yes.
So it
in
goes
between.
They have this weird motion with when they're counting. Nick Patrick was the chief villain, if you will, of that. But the guy who I'm sorry, I didn't bother to see who reffed this match. It wasn't Randy Anderson, I know that. But they all did that. And that was the thing, too, because they did like the fast count spot in the Hogan Sting match at Starrcade, which backfired because everybody was like, that wasn't a fast count. But as Kevin Nash has said, well, for Nick Patrick, it was, because he said about how every WCW referee counted slow, and to me it was like obvious right from the beginning of watching this match, and it is something that permeates throughout WCW. It doesn't matter what show you're watching, who the wrestlers are, who the referee is.
Yeah.
WCW just counted slow.
And I never liked their referee get-ups. The very last match, I thought the guy was wearing sweatpants.
Well, they were still wearing like the old like 80s WWF shirt and bow tie outfits. I mean, by now WWF had switched to like the striped shirt and everything, which made a lot more sense. But WCW was still running like the old style.
Yeah, they probably bought him off of WWF.
you never know. It's always a possibility.
They found him in the trash bin behind the arena.
The Goodwill store.
All right. Any other thoughts on this match?
Yeah, this is like a match that it's a spectacular match. It's a fabulous match, and this is, besides some of the other wrestlers in WCW, this is another reason why I watched WCW. The smaller guys, I was always a big fan of the lucha style, the fast pace. And the cruiserweights in WCW is something I think they had a lot of, and they could have done more with. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, when they started bringing in all the old or the ex-WWE guys, they kind of went away from that and didn't do it as much, because that was definitely something the crowd was really into, and that whole style as well.
They just they had a lot of their events where it's not always good for the best match of the night to be the first match, and that happened in WCW often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and if you go back and you watch I'm not going to say this this happened all the time, but a lot of nitros and a lot of pay-per-views began with cruiserweight matches.
Yeah.
So, but the problem was that they ended up basically pigeonholing themselves, and that they're like, oh, the cruiserweight matches, they're just the curtain jerkers. You know, they're just the matches to get the crowd on their feet and get the crowd amped at the beginning. Because this crowd, I'm going to tell you, for the most part, was a pretty dead crowd for most of the night.
Yeah.
They were, and since I've been doing a lot of WCW rewatching, like I'm into 1997. I mean, WCW crowds got hot, so it wasn't like they couldn't have been hot. This crowd wasn't hot until a certain moment. So, So that really kind of took away in a lot of ways. But yeah, again, WCW just pigeonholed themselves. They could have let the cruiserweight guys be so much more, but they said, no, you're just the opening match guys.
I think with this pay-per-view too, like if you run down the matches, like the main event for the main pay-per-view, like the matches they have, the 3 gimmick matches, and just the matches between the people they have, just I would be bored out of my mind.
Yes.
Like why don't you have? Listen, I'm not saying Steven Regal could work, but I would rather see Eddie Guerrero against Steven Regal on the main card of the match, and especially the Steiners against Harlem Heat for the tag belts, on the main event. That's instead of like on the main event show. And that's one thing I've always hated. Every company does this. I despise and hate when they don't put a title match on the main card and they put it like on a pre-show or some bullshit. I think it's just...
Yeah, I'll run through that in a second, but I know Jeremy wanted to say something.
Yes, I did. But I wanted you guys to get your stuff in too. So, so when I thought, and you guys just mentioned the crowd was kind of dead in the beginning of this match, but got more into it the longer the match went. So I'm glad the match went as long as it did, because if they would have shortened that match, there would have been barely any crowd interaction. They would have, because they started to get hot when they started to see them do the stuff outside the ring, like off the apron and some of that stuff. But the other thing, and I told you guys about this the other night, I had something written down of what Bobby Heenan said that I thought was really, really funny. He calls Rey Mysterio at some point in time. He goes, I think Rey Mysterio was the original San Diego Chicken.
Yes, he does say that.
I remember that.
I was dying. I was like, that is so fucked up.
Bobby Heenan on commentary, again, the stuff he said you can't get away with today. So Bobby Heenan, is definitely very much of his time. In place and everything, but yeah, I mean,
the finish.
I know that half the stuff he says is so inappropriate, but I still can't help but laugh at it. So but yeah, real quick before we get to the rest of the card, I mean, Joe mentioned this. There were 5 matches that aired before Ray and Psychosis did.
5.
Yes, there was a dark match. I'm going to give you the results and the times to kind of also give you an idea. There was a dark match, which wasn't even on the main event show, but a dark match where Jim Powers beat Hugh Morris, 4 minutes, 23 seconds. The Steiner brothers beat Harlem Heat in a match for the tag team titles by DQ, 5 minutes and 1 second.
Horrible.
5 minutes and 1 second for the Steiners and Harlem Heat.
That's terrible.
Hard work Bobby Walker, who would best be known for suing WCW for racial discrimination, beat Billy Kidman, yes, Billy Kidman, in 2 minutes.
Squash.
The Rock and Roll Express, yes, they were still banging around, beat Fire and Ice, Scott Norton and Ice Train, in 2 minutes and 8
I remember
seconds.
them.
And how does that happen? I'm sorry. How do they beat Fire and Ice? That just doesn't make sense to me.
And Eddie Guerrero beat Lord Steven Regal in 3 minutes and 38 seconds. And Joe just mentioned this. You got Eddie Guerrero and Steven Regal, and you don't put them on the main card. I mean, I know there was no story behind their match, but there was no story behind a few of the matches on this card. So
I can't wait to get to some of these matches.
Yes, let's get to get to this train wreck because it's starting.
So that's just pretty terrible. It just kind of shows how WCW still didn't really know what they were doing.
Nope.
And even when they were on top, if you watch like a lot of their pay-per-views, a lot of the pay-per-views are just kind of weird with the way they flow. So, but yes, moving on. Our next match. Okay, real quick first. Mean Gene, who again seemed to be the only guy doing interviews on WCW this night, interviews Conan. He actually asked Conan to explain the moves that were used at the end of the
That was funny. That was funny.
Conan's got this look on his face like, "What, you want me to hold the microphone for you too?" But Conan warns Flair and his entourage that he's ready for them and he'll keep the United States title. Hint. He won't.
I don't know what the hell Conan was wearing, but
he was wearing he wore this really weird outfit with like the frills on it.
We'll get to that during his match, but
But match 2,
the wheels are starting to come off at match 2.
Big Bubba with Jimmy Hart versus John Tenta, the former Earthquake, the former Avalanche, the former Shark, and a Carson City silver dollar match. Now,
what are we doing with fat guys trying to climb a pole? Can you please tell me?
It wasn't just that. It wasn't just that. The pole is fucking 15 feet above the turnbuckle.
What are we doing?
15 feet in the goddamn air. It's fucking awesome.
Climb out back and come get that shit for me, please.
I'm like, none of us would be able to climb up that damn thing and get that fucking roll of silver dollars.
And the announcers kept talking about how, these guys aren't going to be able to climb the pole. So even the announcers are making fun of this match, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, like at one point, like they're both trying to like shake it to get the thing to knock down. Tenta, tries to like cut it down with like the scissors because Bubba tries to tape him to the ropes.
Tenta looked like a complete idiot in this match too, with his half hair. That was awful. What the fuck?
Well, see, I say that was good dedication because he was selling the fact that that's what they had done to him, and he was like willing to say, "Yeah, I'll go out in public looking like this for a couple of weeks or whatever." It's like, I have a soft spot in my heart for John Tenta because he passed away at a very young age due to an actual illness rather than being like a wrestler who died of like a drug problem, something like that.
I agree.
And I always felt he was a little underrated, but yeah, he looks ridiculous wearing full pants. Like he should have just gone back to just wearing the singlet, really. But yeah, so he looks ridiculous. There was no heat for this match. At one point, one of the commentators, I don't remember which one, said he's not a fish, and then Shivani chimed in with, and he's not an avalanche. I'm like, fun way of making reference to the fact that you got sued over calling him Avalanche once.
So just there's something you said that I want to put on the back burner. You said something about Bubba taping him to the ring ropes. That's going to come up in the next match too. Yes. So we had why we're using tape in this match when the next match is a taped fist match. I didn't understand that either.
No, yeah, very much so. So the match finally got a little bit heat when Jimmy Hart literally shimmies up the pole to get the damn silver dollars, and kudos to him for being able to do it.
Yes.
But when he comes back down, Tenta's taking the advantage and he's waiting, so he grabs the silver dollars, nails Bubba with it, and he doesn't even like hit him with it like with a punch. He like literally, because it's in like a sock, he just takes the sock and like whack, like right in the face.
Yeah, he uses it like a slapjack.
Knock
him the fuck out.
He gets the pin, and then he takes the dollars out, and what I thought was a nice touch because I'm like into the Old West and stuff. He takes 2 of the coins and puts them on Bubba's eyes.
Yes.
That kind of signified, I think, that this was the end of this feud, which had to come to an end. It was nice that they gave it a pay-per-view match, but it was this was bad. I mean, again, it made sense considering what they had done on TV from the moment they had kicked Shark out of the Dungeon of Doom and everything like that. And it was good that Tenta got over because he had been humiliated and everything. But it's like 6 years prior to this, these guys were heavily involved in one of the main events of SummerSlam '90 when it was Hogan against Earthquake, and Bossman was in Hogan's corner. I don't know if Bossman and Earthquake in 1990 could have put on a really good match. So they definitely weren't going to in 1996.
Especially when you put him in a match with a 15-foot pole above the ring that they have to climb.
I mean, Tenta was past his prime, and Bubba was overweight here. You could tell he was not a good. The match ends up going 9 minutes even. Meltzer said 1.25 stars.
Wow, he didn't call it a dud. I would have called that match a dud.
Wow.
Again, because it made sense storyline wise, and because for my money, just the ridiculousness of the announcers having to point out the poll and everything, I'd probably say somewhere between 0.5 and 1 star.
Yeah,
So this match reminded me of a 1980s WWF big man match where all they did was throw punches and whip each other into the fucking ropes.
Yep.
Like
And
that's terrible.
a lot of the WCW undercard was still like that because they were using so many ex-WWF guys.
Yeah.
Terrible.
That match was terrible. Let's move on.
Train wreck number 2, unfortunately.
Yeah, they cut back to the announcers. They're talking again about Bischoff being MIA. For some reason, Shivani is now wearing a lei. It's like they're in Florida, not Hawaii.
Yes.
He's even like pointing it out to Heenan. Heenan starts talking. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, Tony?
So real quick though, another thing that I noticed, and you guys all probably agree with this as we go through the matches, there was like almost no selling in that too. Like nobody pretended that they got hurt. Like, oh, you hit me. Okay. Oh, you hit me. Okay.
Very little.
Mean Gene with another interview. He's interviewing our intrepid WCW heroes, Sting, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Lex Luger. Savage says he doesn't care who the third man is. Luger's typical Luger, being all big, strong, and doing his
And terrible.
doing his patented pointing with his thumb and forefinger motion. Sting gets kind of creepy and is talking about goosebumps, and they're all getting goosebumps and how those goosebumps are going to propel them, and it's like, okay.
He was channeling his inner warrior.
Yes.
Yeah, he really was.
Savage and Sting were fine in that promo. Luger is just more advertisement that he's terrible on the mic.
Yeah, Luger's whole promo was always just basically, I'm big, I'm strong, prepare to get pounded to the mat, so.
On the total package.
All right, so the next match, Hacksaw Jim Duggan against Page. One guy who's many years past his prime and one guy who hasn't yet hit it, even though he's older. This is a taped fist match for DDP's Lord of the Ring, which he had won back at the preceding year's Battle Bowl pay-per-view, which for some reason they made it into a thing where Page had lost it to somebody previously. I can't even remember if it was Johnny B. Bad or if it was the Booty Man, but it doesn't matter. Anyway. Page is still doing his white trash character where he's smoking cigars as he comes out.
I loved it. I love that shit.
I mean, Joe, I got to admit, a lot of times when I see this kind of era of Page where he comes out with the sunglasses and cigar smoking, I can totally picture you doing that.
Yes.
I'm not saying that makes you white trash. It's just that I can totally see you walking that way, striking that pose, making those facial expressions.
I gotta find a way to put a cigar and sunglasses on him.
The only
You grow my hair, I'll love it. I'll do it.
The only thing about this match that was good was that DDP was in it. Everything else about this match was bad, in my opinion, too. So
yeah, the couple of notes, and I did not make many for this match. The USA chant always seems to work for some reason. It's like, I know that was practically Duggan's entire gimmick from like the moment he hit.
He's fighting another guy from the United States, though. So
right. And so it's like, why are you people chanting the USA? This match was completely boring. The tape fist part of it really never came into play. Page finally, gets the diamond cutter, and it wasn't even really like the diamond cutter out of nowhere. They weren't quite doing that yet because he hadn't, turned face yet. But then after the match, Duggan takes out because at this era, every Duggan match, he would take out the roll of tape and so ridiculously wind it up to like 10 feet long, and then you just wrap it around real quick and then just nail the guy. So he does that at the end of this match, which mercifully only lasted 5 minutes and 39 seconds. Meltzer actually gave this 1.75 stars. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, this was...
So this is where I'm saying, so the match before this, you had one guy taping the guy to the ring, and now in this match, you also had somebody trying to, he taped his legs together, like Duggan's legs, and he taped his legs together, right, outside the ring or whatever, or wrapped around the ring post.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
so.
It's like,
why? What are you doing when you had a? Why would they do the tape in the match before this when they were doing that in this match? That made no sense at all to me.
No.
Right. As the king of wrestling podcasts, Conrad Thompson would say, "Who booked this shit?" I mean, literally. you have a taped fist match and you let people use athletic tape in a significant way in the prior match. It's like, do you not have the agents talking to each other? It's seriously, who the fuck booked this?
DDP did sell and make Hacksaw look good, and that's the one thing about DDP in this match is that's why I'm saying DDP was the only part of this match I cared about because he did sell and make Hacksaw look good. So kudos to DDP.
That's what I always hated about, like, Mark Madden always had a hard-on for DDP. Like, when he used to write a column for one of the wrestling sites I used to check out, he always referred to Page as DD Me. And it's like, okay, did Page maybe, like, push himself and put himself over? Yeah, every top guy should do that. But I can't ever recall seeing a match where Page didn't sell for the other guy, even if the other guy he was wrestling was a piece of shit. He sold for the Renegade.
Yeah. Come on.
So we started off with a great match, and we've had 2 shit shows after that.
Yes.
And there was another match, Duggan.
We've got another shit show coming, but
we have some more shit shows coming too.
Yeah. All right, so after the match is over, Mean Gene's in the back interviewing the Giant, the Taskmaster, and Jimmy Hart.
Oh my lord!
Taskmaster denies being the weak link of the dungeon because I guess he's been getting picked on like that lately. The Giant warns the Horsemen it's not wise to come after the Dungeon of Doom, and for once he actually sounds fully understandable. He wasn't quite in that, because Big Show's voice, he's the Giant, but it was the Big Show.
I still think he sounded like an idiot, but
well, a lot of times though he gets a little too worked up too easily, and so he's like his cheeks kind of get jowled, and like you can tell the saliva is building up in it, and so like it makes his words sound a little weird.
Just growl.
Yeah. He at least sounded fairly clear here, but anyway,
I was not excited, and that promo did not excite me for that match though, and I think that's what that promo was supposed to do, get me excited for that match, and it did not.
Yeah, and
sorry, you said just saliva building up in his mouth, and it was just
yeah, and Mean Gene got an insult in on Jimmy Hart before he kicked it to Lee Marshall. They're great. You guys get that joke, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Well, Lee Marshall did the voice of Tony the Tiger.
Oh, did he? I did not know that.
So he's out on like the top of the entrance ramp interviewing Arn and Benoit. Now I got to admit, Arn's out there in his gear and wearing his glasses. That's just a funny fucking look. Okay.
Weird.
Arn's part was fine. Arn did his part.
Arn was again another one of those underrated mic masters.
Yes.
He warns the outsiders, hey, I don't like those 3 guys, but you're going to have your hands full with them. So, hey, Arn's selling the main event too. But then he says the Dungeon are going to pay for having crossed the Horsemen. And then Benoit talks. He tries to be menacing, but he's speaking too slowly and too uncomfortably to really take him seriously. You can tell he just didn't know what he
just stand there and put the 4 fingers up, and that's all you should have done at that point. So
it was awesome because his pauses in between some of his words were like 2 seconds long. You're like, oh, there's the next word. Okay.
You could just tell he was not comfortable doing it. I mean, he would get better. He never got great, like we've said, but this was still, it was like, this is like, please.
This was, like I said, just don't let him talk. Just stand there with 4 fingers up.
Yeah. But it's like, I guess they felt like they had to at least make him talk because even though he was like, he was really kind of becoming like the tough guy. He couldn't be the enforcer because Arn was still the enforcer, but he also wasn't Barry Windham or Lex Luger or Sid Vicious sized. So he couldn't just stand there and be like the strong silent type either.
Just do this and put the 4 fingers up, Benoit. Yeah. That's all you needed to do. Just do that because I even admit when he did that, it was cool. I'll even give Benoit that. So
be the rabid Wolverine and be done with it.
Yes. Okay, so what's next, Pat?
So the next match, and this is where you're going to get your wish for something that you asked me for earlier. The Nasty Boys against Public Enemy.
Oh, my God.
And a four-man dog collar match.
What a terrible idea. Let's say right now, what are we doing with the 4-man dog collar?
You have the Nasty Boys, who have always wrestled semi-hardcore. And then you have Public Enemy, who have definitely wrestled the hardcore.
Right.
And you're going to put them in a dog collar match. Just make it a standard fucking hardcore match. The fans would have probably eaten that shit up But no, let's put dog collars on these motherfuckers.
And split the camera give us a split cam during the match.
So Sags is hooked up to Rocco Rock. Knobs is hooked up to Johnny Grunge. Public Enemy comes out with the plunder. They got the plunder with him, Tony Schiavone. They got the plunder. They're carrying a table, but yes, Dusty had a habit of this era because he called like the Saturday night shows, which unfortunately the Saturday night shows from this year are not on the network. But he also called the pay-per-views in, and whenever there was like a hardcore match or whatever, it was always the plunder. I just found that hysterical. Public Enemy was pretty over with the crowd. Nasty Boys less so, which was surprising because Public Enemy was relatively new to the company at this point. But anyway.
And I like Public Enemy, so before I start degrading this match, I like Public Enemy. So I like them.
I like both of these teams, provided that you put them in the right situations.
Correct.
I mean, the match very quickly went outside. They start using trash cans. They start going back up the ramp up to like the set,
sand. Watch out for the sand.
Which was just basically a type of sand, a bunch of sand, and then finally, what's he doing, Tony Schiavone? Oh my God, Tony Schiavone! He's beating him with a shark. Tony Schiavone. I watched this pay-per-view like a couple years ago. I totally forgot he said that. When I watched it again this afternoon, I was laughing my ass off because it does come, being that it's Dusty, it comes out shark. Not shark, it's shark. Oh my God. It was just, it was like an inflatable plastic, maybe just plastic shark, and he's fucking hitting him with it. I remember who was hitting who, it doesn't even matter, but
it was ridiculous.
So the problem though with this match is that they go outside and everything, and this isn't like modern day wrestling where they have all the big screens everywhere. So the problem is that you're losing the audience, the arena audience, when you're doing that, when they can't see the match. It's fine for us at TV, but like you said, they didn't have split screen much for it either. So the production again kind of took away.
And they have the split screen, and there's times when they're all on the split screens. Like they didn't do a very good job of going away from that. When you can see the other two guys in the background on the split, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Good idea, poorly executed.
Yes.
They eventually get back in the ring. They try to do a couple table spots. At one point, Rocco Rock's on the top turnbuckle. Sags yanks him down off the turnbuckle onto the table, and the table doesn't break.
And you can see his face.
And they tried to do another spot on the table, and it still didn't break. The same table didn't break twice. It finally broke then after the match, but finally then the
collar broke.
Yeah, then the match-ending spot was actually kind of cool and a little dangerous, really. Knobs throws Grunge over the top rope and then runs with the chain so that it's taut. So Grunge is on the outside basically being hung, depending upon how much give was in the collar. And then Sags whips Rock into it, basically gets clotheslined, and that leads to the pin. I mean, kind of a weird spot to do a pin, but at least it'll look kind of cool. Yeah. And then, again, they continued to brawl a little bit after the match was over. That's all this match was a brawl, like you said. I mean, that's all you probably should have expected from a dog collar match, but it didn't settle or resolve anything. I think the teams kind of continued to feud a little bit after this, but they also started having the Nasty Boys flirting with joining the NWO for a while. Match went 11 minutes, 25 seconds. Meltzer said 1.25 stars. I might be a little bit more generous because I kind of just like the all-out brawls, which are supposed to be all-out brawls, but I'm not going any more than like 2 stars.
I'm not going anywhere near that. Even when they were like trying to climb in the lifeguard chair, they looked like they did not know what was going on at multiple points in this match.
I can see that. If it kind of almost felt like they hadn't really walked this through very well.
So my 2 notes for this match. Possibly worst match of the night.
It's not, though. That's the problem.
Well, there's multiple ones to pick from, so.
And my other note says, this reminded me of us wrestling doing our hardcore
matches. Kudos, because we didn't know what the fuck we were doing, so we were allowed to not know. These guys are supposed to know what they're doing, and they didn't.
Like, I was watching this.
If we had a plastic shark, I'm sure we would have used it at some point.
You bet.
We would have.
But
would you have called it that, Pat? Would you have would you have Dusty channeled your inner Dusty? Okay, sorry, Jeremy.
Sorry. No, but and the reason why it reminded me of us wrestling when we did our Herker matches, and I actually think we hit each other harder with stuff, is you see Rocco Rock hitting the guy with hitting geez whiz, who was he tied? He was tied up to Sags. And he's like doing this with the garbage can.
He's tapping him even with the garbage can lid. They weren't even hitting each other hard with those things.
He hits him with the lid, and he's like barely hitting him. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, fucking hit him! Like already. Like, would you just hit him? And like, no selling hits. Like guys were getting hit, and they weren't even being fazed by anything. And then like weird shots, like somebody would just randomly throw an arm out and punch somebody. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yes,
like this is just weird to watch.
So we've had 3 bad matches in a row.
Yeah.
Oh my god,
okay.
It was hard.
Right.
I had a hard time watching this going through those 3 matches. I'm like, oh my god, like please get better.
Fun fact,
Next up, I'm sorry.
Real quick. Fun fact, real quick. I met the Nasty Boys.
Well, they are from this area.
When I worked at the gas station on 191 in that shopping center, there was a guitar villa at the top half, and Brian Knob's brother, I believe his name was Chris, I could be wrong, he came into the gas station all the time. I would talk to him, and he didn't know I was a wrestling fan, and one day I was talking to one of my coworkers that worked there about one of the pay-per-views. He's like, oh, you like wrestling? I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, my brother's a professional wrestler. Him and his tag team partner are going to be up next week. He goes, I'll introduce him to you. And it was like kind of like a hurry thing because we got busy. So following week comes down. He goes, yeah, I want you to meet my brother's here. Come on up and meet him. I was like, all right, cool. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to take my break. I go up there. I walk in, and there's both fucking Nasty Boys just chilling right there. Talk to them. They were cool-ass dudes. And they're like, do you want an autograph? I was like, that'd be great. I was like, I didn't want to like ask and like geek out. He was like, no, cool, man. And I talked wrestling with them for like from the whole 30 minutes of my break. They were cool as shit, both of them. Cool. They went in their car. They got me like 2 pictures, different ones, and they both autographed them. And I still have them to this day. But it was interesting that like. He was like, I have no idea who I'm meeting. I'm just being a professional wrestler. I'm like, I know this guy because he comes in every day. I've known him for 2 years now working here. And it's the first time we're talking about professional wrestling. And like, his brother is one of the Nasty Boys.
At least it wasn't like Barry Horowitz or somebody like that. So,
and it's weird because like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, looking at Brian Knobs and looking at him, I'm like, he goes, no, I'm not the milkman's son, don't worry, because they don't look like they're related. That was the other thing that was a little weird. You can kind of see it, but not a lot. And then he just told me, he's like, oh man, I've been to Macho Man's house, I've been to so and so's house, I've been to Hogan's.
Well, of course he's been to Hogan's.
He's like, he goes, I've been over to Mean Gene's place. Like he was just like all this crap. He goes, oh, in the summers we go here and there and we hang out. I'm like, holy shit. I'm just like, can you take me one time?
I'd love to be Hogan.
Just like all those guys, Rick Rude and all that shit. So it was cool. Sorry, I sidetracked. But
that's a cool story.
I met those guys and they were really nice. They didn't like treat me like I was dumb or anything. They did talk wrestling like we talked legit wrestling. So it was cool.
Yeah. I've met 3 wrestlers in my life, 2 of them very briefly at autograph signings, but all 3 guys were pretty nice. So those 3 guys being Kerry Von Erich, Edge, and Snitsky. So
I also met Edge.
Yeah, we were there together. So yep. All right. So next up, Mean Gene's outside the Outsiders locker room, which is surrounded by security. He just speculates as to who the third man is. Nothing much there. The next match was probably the surprise of both shows. Dean Malenko against the Disco Inferno for the Cruiserweight title. Disco gets on the mic before the match. He's as annoying as ever.
Which I liked. That's why I liked him.
The story about this was that I guess Disco had interrupted one of Malenko's matches a couple weeks earlier, so Malenko wanted to teach Disco a lesson. Malenko comes out. He's pretty intense. Now, one thing I'll also say I noticed real quick, there was really no heat for this match at the beginning, like for pretty much every match on this card. A few months later, the crowd would be into Malenko all the time. Malenko ended up becoming one of the most over guys, even as the NWO was running rampant. Malenko got one of the best crowd reactions at most every Nitro, but he wasn't there yet. He's pretty much dominating the match left and right. The announcers just keep admiring that Disco won't give up. He won't go down without a fight. Disco starts getting some offense. The crowd starts getting into it. There was also a really good spot where one time, like, Disco whipped Malenko into the corner and then followed him in, but Malenko did the leapfrog over him. There's a second spot then where Disco whips him in again, and Malenko tries to do the leapfrog, but Disco stops short this time, and so he's waiting for Malenko to land and, hits him. So, hey, some good in-the-match psychology and, showing that the guys are actually paying attention. I always like when you get details like that.
Yeah.
They keep on mentioning about how Disco kind of keeps reverting back to his showboating and won't go for the pins when he has the chances. And you see Disco even fighting with himself to try to, keep himself straight. Eventually he goes back and forth, but finally Malenko hits the underhook powerbomb and then turns it into the Texas Cloverleaf to get the submission win. Pretty good match, I thought. I'm pretty sure you hear Disco Inferno's in a match, you have low expectations, so that probably helps it. Went 12 minutes and 4 seconds. Meltzer gave it 3.25 stars.
Interesting. Yeah. It's Dean Malenko. Malenko and Disco Inferno, they can both, we know what Malenko do. And I always liked Disco Inferno. He could always work. He was average on the mic. I kind of liked his weird-ass gimmick. For some reason, he was just so, overly arrogant. It just made me like him. I don't know.
I think what happened a lot with Disco is that nobody really ever thought he was a good wrestler because his character could be so annoying. But he could work if he had to, and obviously Malenko was always one of the best workers in the business.
Yeah. I thought... Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeremy.
So I actually thought this was a good match also, after especially seeing 3 big stinkers in a row.
Yep.
And Disco Inferno sold, and he also at times oversold, which I always enjoy in a match too. Like, if you're going to sell something, sell it. And then if you really want to sell it, just oversell it. Just kill it. Make it look really bad, So I enjoyed that part.
It was good. Malenko, I never liked Malenko, but he can wrestle. He did a good job of that whole I don't care, the stone face gimmick, but that's why I didn't like him, because he had no charisma at all. So he was a really good wrestler, and that match was good because of him, and he didn't ever have bad matches. He was a guy, he was one of their guys in WCW that you could put him in the ring with anybody. Mm-hmm. And maybe they should have put Joe Gomez with Malenko, I don't know. So
Speaking of,
can we just skip the next match?
No, we can't.
Listen.
And there's a reason why. I trust you. There's a reason why.
I know there's a reason why.
Another train wreck is coming.
So the next match, Steve McMichael with Queen Deborah versus Desperado Joe Gomez.
The Desperado.
There was no heat for this one. Nope. The entire crowd might as well have been dead. Literally dead. Sitting in their seats, but dead. McMichael was obviously greener than green. This was only a month after they did the whole thing with him teaming with Kevin Green, and he turned on him to join the Horsemen. Gomez was just not a good worker. His character was really non-existent. He's Desperado Joe Gomez. Well, that's meaningless. He didn't come out wearing a cowboy hat or anything. And he was another just kind of big, wide-bodied guy when you come right down to it. This is the kind of match that should never in your life have been on a fucking pay-per-view.
That should have been on the pre-show for sure. If you're going to do that at all, pre-show.
This is a Nitro match. Obviously, they're trying to do something with McMichael, having him join the Horsemen. That's fine. You got to build him up on TV before you start throwing him out there on pay-per-view. Or if you're going to throw him out there on pay-per-view, give him somebody who can maybe work and maybe make him look good, because Gomez didn't make him look good in any way. McMichael finally wins with a tombstone after they had what I put down was a botched sunset flip spot, which doesn't really surprise you. Deborah was not annoying, and that's only because she never talked. Because she easily had the most annoying voice in WCW. The match went 6 minutes 44 seconds, which was probably 6 minutes and 45 seconds too long.
Too long. Yep.
Meltzer's rating, and this is why we have to quickly talk about this match. -0.5 star. So
Or to get a
I've
negative
seen,
5.
I've seen Meltzer give other negative star ratings to other matches. Like I'm pretty sure his most famous negative star rating is to the Hogan Andre WrestleMania 3 match. I think he gave that like -2 stars.
Okay, well,
But so I'm saying to myself,
feasible.
well, wait a second. What the hell is the difference between giving something negative stars and rating something a dud? Like, what's the point? So I did a little bit of research, and I found this on a Reddit page. So take this with a huge grain of salt.
Oh, Lord, here we go.
But this is what it is. This supposedly Meltzer himself explained this at one point to somebody.
Okay.
A dud match is one without any redeeming social value. And I go, wrestling matches are supposed to have a social value? A negative rating means that not only was the match itself worthless, which this match was, but it was also obnoxiously bad, which this match was. So this is the way I look at it. If he's giving negative stars and obviously positive stars, a dud to me means it's 0 stars.
Yes.
Now,
Didn't go bad or good.
That being said, the Ultimate Warrior Jerry Lawler match, which he rated a dud, against this match, which he rated -0.5 star. Was the Warrior Lawler match really a half star better than this match?
Yes, because Lawler cut that promo on his way to the ring.
Okay, if you're going to include that as part of the match, I will allow that.
I will allow that.
I mean, what is to say to me? Why there were 2 other matches on this card that could have been duds, in my opinion. So,
well, the other thing too is I think when we were discussing this event the other night when we were on one of our calls,
before I got on,
I think Jeremy said that this card was too long. Did you say that, Jeremy?
Yes, there was too many matches.
Yeah.
Well, this would have been where the William Regal match could have been. We could have had that match instead of Joe Gomez. I felt like you said, they had to get Mongo on, and noticeably the 4 Horsemen matches are back to back to back too. It's like, let's do all 4 Horsemen matches in succession.
So it's obvious that they're still trying to hype up to the Horsemen are a big deal, and they decided to make Mike McMichael a part of it for whatever reason rather than pick somebody else. And of course, they'd been in limbo since Pillman had walked out with that because it would really just been the 3 Horsemen. But still, it's like, yeah, you could have put on a match that didn't have any story in Eddie Guerrero, Steven Regal, which would have been better, or you could have just not had this match on the damn card and maybe given some of the other matches a few more minutes. Because it's like, I think we could have done with a couple more minutes of Ray and Psychosis. I think a couple more minutes of Disco and Malenko would have been okay. I think the main event match being a couple minutes longer would have been fine too, because it was the significance attached to it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's just move on.
They could use McMichael as part of another match.
Yeah.
As a heel. So to build him up as more of a heel and to like interfere in one of the other matches, like him and Deborah.
They already had
used that.
When we get to the next match, they already had too many people that were going to interfere in that match, so McMichael couldn't come down in that one.
Well, the next matches are
added to the glory.
Yeah, well, pretty much every part of the following 3 matches are interference filled. But so anyway, Mean Gene is then interviewing Flair, Woman, and Elizabeth. Gene was very much doing the dirty old man shit. He was always distracted by Woman. Woman was pretty entertaining. And kind of sort of surprisingly, Woman always flirted right back with him. So
I will say that Elizabeth was looking mighty fine on this.
I was going to mention something like that in a second, but Flair talks about Conan saying he has 1,000 holds, which I'm like, wait a minute, does he think he's wrestling Malenko? The promo devolves into being nothing about the match and being about the after party at the hotel. Gene gives a line saying about how there's going to be a pole vaulting competition at the after party.
Wow.
Hey, that's a little risque for Mean Gene and WCW, but yes. So one other website that has reviewed old Nitros in the past, they talked about Elizabeth coming back in 1996. And they started basically referring to her as MILF Elizabeth.
Damn right.
As
Damn
opposed
straight.
as opposed to like WWF Elizabeth. And they were basically saying, well, WWF era Elizabeth was kind of like the sweet, innocent girl next door. WCW MILF Elizabeth was the Elizabeth who could teach you a thing or two.
I've
always remembered reading that. So
than the earlier part.
Yeah. I mean, she was definitely, wearing more cleavage, bearing outfits
For sure.
at this point.
She went from wearing like gown dresses to actually like wearing something provocative.
She kind of went from like prude to slut.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense when she's hanging around with Flair and the Horsemen too. So.
That was a nice way of putting it.
She's a lot hotter in WCW.
She is. 100% agree with you on that. I think all four of us agree on that. So.
Okay. So the next match is Konnan defending the U.S. title against Ric Flair. At the beginning of the match, Flair goes to shake Konnan's hand. Konnan is very wary of doing so, but he does shake Flair's hand, and Flair doesn't attack him. That's odd.
Konnan in his weird outfit.
Yep, Konnan in his weird outfit. Flair basically starts playing mind games. The match starts slow. Both men are kind of trading moves and taunts. Konnan tries to get the crowd into it, not very successfully.
Nope.
Flair's playing the mind games by just constantly basically teasing, hey, I'm Ric Flair, you're nothing. So he was playing the psychology fine. Woman screeching her head off. We were talking about Mankind screeches earlier. The woman screeches. Oh God. So annoying.
They were bad.
Yeah.
The way she did it, oh my God.
There was a spot where she did a low blow onto Konnan, which I put seemed really odd, but I didn't put why it was odd, so I don't remember now, unfortunately. Konnan gets control and actually puts a figure four on at one point, while Flair does his Flair stuff throughout the match. Flair finally gets the pin after Woman takes off her shoe and hits Konnan with the heel of it in the eye, which was a spot that they had done to Hogan months before. And Flair gets the pin while also using the ropes for leverage.
The top rope, nonetheless.
Yes, I think one of the announcers even said adding insult to injury. So Flair's the new United States champion. The match went 15 minutes, 39 seconds. Meltzer gave it 2.5 stars. I don't know if I would actually score it that high. I feel like this probably could have been better because Flair was still Flair. And Konnan was a decent worker who, for whatever reason, you would never really know if you only ever watched him in WCW because they pigeonholed him into certain things, whether it was with the Dungeon of Doom or then when he turned to the NWO. But I almost feel like that this match was kind of slow. There wasn't enough action in it. And that maybe it was like a clash of styles. And I have to feel like if that's the case, it was probably Flair wasn't comfortable doing Konnan style.
There was... Yes. Flair seemed like he was a step slow in this match at times. I don't think that there was any like major botches, but it just was not what I was used to seeing Flair wrestle. And this match could have been better than it was. So I was slightly disappointed, and there was too much hijinks at the end of this match. It was like too predictable that there was going to be interference. It was like almost so predictable that it ruined it for me.
Yeah, it was to me. It was like kind of sorry, Jeremy. It was strangely without like lacking in like compellingness. And yeah, it's like there's just way too many spots where like Elizabeth's getting up on the ring to distract the referee so Flair and Woman can do whatever behind his back. And this is one of the things that I know it's a staple of wrestling, but I've always hated it. It's like, why does the referee allow himself to be distracted by the person in the corner coming up onto the apron and doing stuff all the time? It's like you almost wish that would be something they'd break away from, and the referee would be like, I know you're trying to cheat behind my back, so I'm gonna ignore you getting in my face and pay attention to that. So
well, and one of the times they went to cheat and the ref actually sees the cheating starting to happen, but then all of a sudden he turns his head like, oh, I don't really see that. Just a sec. I'm over here. I was like, okay, that's just bad.
Maybe that was like the spot where I said about how it was really odd with the low blow spot. It might have been. Yeah, I don't know.
I think so.
This was a. I don't like when I talk about Flair. this was a bad match for Ric Flair. Like, the expectation for him, like, this was below standard for him, I think. So,
yeah. And you could see Flair calling the match at points. You could actually see him telling Conan, hit me more, you know, like, because I felt like almost Conan didn't know what to do either.
Yeah, I think it might have been the style clashing, maybe Flair, maybe him and Conan just, they didn't have chemistry, I don't think. So
yeah, and I'm not sure they ever wrestled each other again one-on-one after this. I mean, I'd have to go through every result to look, but I just don't feel like that. I just don't feel like they did. All right. So Mean Gene's outside the door, closer to the door of the Outsiders' locker room. He claims that he got up really close and he heard a third man, muffled voice that sounded vaguely familiar. And it's like, knowing where it goes, you listen to that now and you go,
of course it sounded familiar.
You think it sounded familiar?
Right. They drew out the whole outsider thing way too much during this pay-per-view.
They made this pay-per-view all about that, and like even during other matches, they were talking about the main event. They were doing no justice to most of the rest of the matches that were going on.
A huge oversell.
That's true, but it's like I understand that for a couple of reasons. One, they were still kind of making, even though, you know, Bischoff had asked Nash and Hall at the Great American Bash, do you work for the WWF? And they said no. That was more for like to try to help stave off lawsuits. They were still trying to sell the aspect that they were invading from the other company. So they are trying to make it sound like, again, this is the most important event in the history of this company, you know. So I get that. And again, it is the mystery of who's the third man. And again, you know, there's so many rumors about who the third man was going to be. Is it going to be Sting? Is it going to be Luger? Is it going to be Bret Hart? Is it going to be the British Bulldog? Is it going to be Mabel? I'm not joking. I'm not joking about that, by the way. Supposedly at one point, Meltzer ran a story saying that Mabel was going to be the third man.
That would have been fantastic.
Yeah. So, you know, all I can remember about going into this is that, you know, Hogan had been off TV for 2 or 3 months at this point. And in the back of my head somewhere, I was saying to myself, wouldn't that be cool if it was Hogan? You know? So, but we'll get there. So the next match was Arn Anderson and Chris Benoit representing the Horsemen against the Giant, who's the WCW Heavyweight Champion, and the Taskmaster representing the Dungeon of Doom. And this is one of my big pet peeves about WCW. Not having the heavyweight title defended on a pay-per-view. That always annoyed the shit out of me. It especially annoyed the shit out of me when Hogan in the middle of the NWO angle was the champion, and it was like, well, I'm not showing up to this pay-per-view. You know? Yeah. So, but anyway. Giant and Taskmaster jump Arn and Benoit during their entrance, and as they start brawling, McMichael shows up, and it's really hard to see this, but apparently he showed up with the briefcase, and that distracted the Giant enough for the Giant to chase McMichael backstage, which then, of course, allows Arn and Benoit to take Sullivan to the ring and start beating on him. Eventually, the Giant gets back there, but, you know, it was an interesting way to start the match. I put watching Benoit and Sullivan lay into each other always had a perversely entertaining effect because you could never tell. You could never tell just quite how real it actually was. Because, you know, the joke, of course, was that, you know, Sullivan booked his own divorce by, you know, having Benoit go off with women and everything. And you know that they hated each other. And, of course, it lasted to the point where Sullivan was made head booker again after they fired Russo in early 2000, which, of course, is what led Benoit and the other Radicals to jump to WWF, which was, you know, one more nail in WCW's coffin. So just whenever you watch these two guys fighting with each other was always kind of perversely entertaining. There was a stipulation in this match that if the Horsemen won, Flair would get a title shot the next night on Nitro. The only time it's ever really mentioned is when Shivani points it out to say that the Horsemen weren't really going for pins on Sullivan, especially when Giant had yet come back to the ring. So it was very weird. Again, they just didn't sell the stipulation at all.
No.
Sullivan worked most of the match. You could kind of tell that the crowd really wanted the Giant to get in the ring. Like, he was like over, and he was getting like he was getting like baby face pops. Like, the crowd was like really treating the Dungeon guys as the baby face. They wanted the Giant to come in the ring. Now, there was a spot where Benoit went up for the old spike pile driver, like Arn and Tully used to do. And there was a pretty noticeable botch here where Sullivan reverses And,
trying to monkey flip or whatever.
Tries to like slingshot Arn into the turnbuckle to knock Benoit off of it, which is what happens. But it looked terrible. And as we found out when we tried to do the wrestling, that slingshot is not easy to do.
Yeah, it was very slow to develop, and Arn was trying to fix it and he couldn't.
Yeah, but it's like you kind of almost think two old pros like Arn and Sullivan would have been able to pull it off, and they didn't. It just looked bad.
Yeah, that was a bad botch. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. So.
Yeah, finally Giant gets tagged in, but as soon as he does, he knocks Arn out of the ring, and Benoit and Sullivan just keep fighting back up towards the announce position. They even get up on like the announce platform that's set up. Meanwhile, back in the ring, Giant hits Arn with a looking choke slam. I don't think he got Arn up really good, and he gets the pin. But then after the match, Benoit and Sullivan are still fighting. They're like getting onto the sand where you can actually see the sand getting onto their bodies, which was kind of funny. But in a very bizarre spot, you see Benoit and Sullivan fighting here, and then in the back you see the Giant and Jimmy Hart just walk into the back like, oh, he's fighting Benoit? Yeah, okay, whatever.
No big deal.
Benoit and Sullivan brawl back to the ring. Benoit's fully in command, and then Woman comes out and begs Benoit to stop, which is weird, as the announcers pointed out. And then the Giant and Hart finally come back out and chase Arn and Benoit off, with Giant even going like, "What are you doing?" It's like that scene in Liar Liar. It's like, I'm kicking my ass. What do you think? They're kicking his ass.
Benoit was like really beating the shit out of him at that point.
Yeah. So, some weirdness there. The match itself went 7.59. Meltzer gave it 2 stars. Again, this is a match that feels like should have been better than it was.
There was when the Giant got tagged in, Benoit was standing right there, and he didn't even acknowledge that the Giant got tagged in. Like, I felt like if the Giant gets tagged in that situation, why wouldn't you go after Benoit when he's standing right next to you? They ignored each other, and Benoit rolled out of the ring. It was so bizarre. I'm like, why is the Big Show not going after Benoit? He's standing right next to him.
Well, I couldn't even remember who the legal man was between Arn and Benoit at that point, because I thought it was Benoit. But again, the way that Benoit immediately goes after Sullivan and the Giant just ignored him and focused on Arn, it's like, well, I guess it
was just weird. I think Arn was it was just weird, because if you're the Big Show and you're getting the hot tag and you're pissed off at that point, wouldn't you just go after whoever you could get your hands on at that point?
Yeah,
it was just weird.
All you got to do is throw one punch at him.
Yeah, or headbutt him or do something. They just Benoit just walked by him and rolled out.
It was weird.
And once again, Kevin Sullivan with the no sell a lot. I got hit. Okay.
Again, I think when you know what was going on between him and Benoit, backstage and personally and everything, this makes perfect sense.
He was no selling Arn Anderson too.
Anytime when I go back and watch Kevin Sullivan at this point, I'm just laughing in my head because I don't like him and I think he's an idiot and I don't think he's good at wrestling, and I just laugh every time I watch him wrestle now because I'm like, this is going to be entertaining. He might do the double stomp to win, which is the worst finisher other than Jericho's finisher currently right now. Though I hate the double stomp. So
no, he needed to stop wrestling, which he did the next year. But I know he was still coming up with a lot of the booking and a lot of the backstage stuff. So
booking fine. He was okay with he wasn't terrible at booking. He just the in-ring stuff with me. I just never thought he was very good.
We're getting to the last match of this pay-per-view finally, right?
Finally.
19 matches later.
Yes, we are. We're finally at the main event. Macho Man Randy Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger versus the Outsiders and the Third Man. The Hostile Takeover match. They run a video package.
That's a terrible video package, by the way.
His first appearance through up to the pay-per-view, and I put once again highlights how WWF production was infinitely better. Yeah. Again, it was like you're a television company, or just steal some of Vince's guys, or just steal the way that they. Oh my God. Michael Buffer ring announcing. I always kind of liked Michael Buffer ring announcing because it always had a sense of making the event seem bigger. The problem was that WCW very quickly started overusing him.
Yeah, quite a bit.
The Outsiders come to the ring alone. And so Mean Gene, as you hear Sting's music starting to play, Mean Gene walks to the ring and he interviews Hall and Nash.
So bizarre.
Hall, still doing the full Razor Ramon, calls him Scheme Gene and assures that their partner is there and that he's ready. Nash agrees with that and says, "We can handle this, though." So Gene goes away and the Faces make their entrances. Listening to Heenan side with the Faces is odd, but hey, that was the circumstance of the match. Starts off with Luger and Hall. Hall takes the early advantage until Luger comes back with a few power moves and then hits Nash. A brawl quickly breaks out, which leads to Luger getting knocked out when Sting does a splash to Nash in the corner, but Nash was holding Luger's head against the turnbuckle. Luger falls to the outside, knocked out.
Is dead.
This is only about 2 minutes into the match.
Yes.
Luger is dead.
I thought it was like a few minutes further into the match, but no. Now, this was obviously done for two reasons. One, to make it a 2-on-2, because a face team can never have a 3-on-2 advantage. That's just not the way wrestling works.
No.
And also, it was definitely made as a misdirect to make you think that Luger could come back and be the third man, because, hey, he had been in WWF for 2 or 3 years up until the previous fall, so it would have made sense. But I think it was also even maybe thrown in there to make you think that maybe Sting could have been the third man, which again supposedly was the plan if Hogan hadn't agreed, because Sting knocked Luger out, So anyway, they clear Luger out on a stretcher. The match resumes with Hall and Sting. Hall slaps Sting and Sting just goes berserk, which was a nice touch because, again, these guys have been criticizing you, belittling you for the last several weeks and everything. Yeah, go nuts on them. Savage tags in, goes up top. Hall hits him in the midsection. Hall distracts Sting and the ref, so Nash comes in and hits Savage with the snake eyes. Nash tags in and keeps the advantage. I said that he kind of sort of missed an elbow, but I think it was botched. Savage rolled away, tagged Sting in. Nash took the advantage on Sting, pounding on him in the corner. Sting reversed a whip and hit a drop kick, but he couldn't complete a sunset flip as Nash just grabbed him by the throat and then threw him to the mat. So really selling that Nash is a huge power guy. At this point in the match, Shivani mentioned that the guys were picked randomly, and I remember they did literally pick 3 names out of a hat out of 6. Like the other 3 names that weren't picked were Flair, Arn, and Hogan. So Shivani's hey, let's just play by our own rules. They've been doing it. Somebody else should just come down here and replace Luger. I mean, it's kind of a funny thing, but obviously it wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. Hall tagged back in, hit Sting with his patented fallaway slam. Nash tagged in, hit a big boot. They both kept antagonizing Savage because, one trademark throughout Randy Savage's WCW tenure was that he was basically always one step away from just completely snapping. It's like, even more so than in his WWF days, they just always depicted Savage as being completely fucking nuts. Sting ducks a clothesline, hits a drop kick to Nash's knee, but Nash is able to tag out before Sting can. Sting gets a small package, but Savage ends up actually distracting the ref so that they can't get a 3 count. Hall gets the advantage back, puts on the abdominal stretch, does the leverage assist from Nash. Nash and Hall just keep beating on Sting, tagging in and out, hitting moves back and forth. Savage is on the barrier. Sting finally fights back, knocks Nash down, knocks Hall off the apron, and then dives over top of Nash to get the tag to Savage. Savage comes in like a house of fire, takes it to both men. He hits a lot of top rope double axe handles and everything.
Like 6 in a row.
Then finally he's got Nash down on his knees, and Nash hits the low blow, and everyone is down. And then...
Dun, 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 dun.
Hulkamania! Hulk Hogan is here, baby! And I listened to this again, and the crowd reaction for when Hogan came down is definitely not what it should have been. The crowd should have been going nuts when Hogan came down because...
Like the announcers were.
He was the big hero. He had been off TV since I think it was like April. So everybody should be going nuts for him. And they really didn't. It was like a kind of just like a average pop, let's just say. Then, of course, Heenan. Oh, boy. I love Bobby Heenan. We know that his whole history was that he was arguably Hulk Hogan's greatest antagonist, more so than any actual wrestler.
Yep.
But when he goes with the whose side is he on line, now we know Heenan was always paranoid and shit too, but the fact that he did that just terrible. And if you go to the Wikipedia page for this show, it even mentions that the comment was edited out of the match on the Hulk Hogan Anthology DVD, but it's left in other versions, including on the network version. So it's kind of weird. So Hogan gets in, he chases both outsiders from the ring. You can see that Hall got back up and he kind of repositioned Savage in the ring. I didn't notice that until this afternoon. You know, Hogan comes in, you know, chases them out of the ring, rips the shirt, surveys the scene, turns around and drops the leg on Randy Savage.
Hooray!
And the announcers are shocked. The crowd stunned. There are some people in the crowd cheering. You can see.
There are.
Yes,
Oh,
there
yeah.
are.
Yes, it were. That was cool.
Most of the crowd is just kind of just looking on in this like stunned disbelief. They're not even really booing. They're just like,
what the fuck just happened? That's
yeah.
I was
exactly.
cheering at home when I saw that. It was odd,
Yeah.
but I found myself really liking that turn.
About time.
So Hogan hits 2 more leg drops, throws poor Randy Anderson out of the ring, and makes a pin as the announcers are just losing it over what Hogan's done. You know, he's betrayed WCW, blah, blah, blah. They start celebrating. Sting collects Savage, and they limp to the back, disgraced fallen heroes. Hogan even mocks Sting's yell at one point. But I'm not sure if that makes the network version, because if you remember, there was that one
did not.
fat idiot.
yes. They don't
And that
show
doesn't
that on the
make- yep.
network.
That's cut out too.
Who tries to jump into the ring. That is edited out of the network version.
It is.
So you,
It is.
if you want to see that, you got to go find clips on YouTube.
Because when Zach was actually watching the end of it with me tonight, because I wanted him to see the Hogan promo because he had never seen it before, and I'm like, hey, there's a fan gonna jump in the ring at some point here and get beat up, and I'm like, oh, I guess they edited it out.
Well, I think that's when they go to a close up on Hogan's face.
No, it's not. But
Oh, it's
I
not
wanted
that.
to mention that too. Yeah, no, they were able to just totally cut it because it happened before Gene came into the ring, but it happened like after they started throwing shit. So obviously that was the point where you knew that this worked, when the fans started throwing this stuff into the
Yes.
ring. So it was pretty incredible. Hall and Nash start imitating all of Hogan's poses. They start doing the year. I know a couple times Hall went like
Yeah.
this and everything. So that really sold it. You know, Gene comes in, he looks distraught. Heenan even makes mentions that like Okerlund looks like he's gonna cry. Hogan cuts the promo. At one point, I thought Gene said Hall and Nash's names, and it got edited out. But then I did hear their names later in the promo, because I think this event might have even been the first time that they actually referred to Hall and Nash by name. Like, I don't think they'd ever called them Hall and Nash at any Nitro before this. I could be wrong, but
Yeah, because he says at one point.
I couldn't find that definitively. But yeah,
Yeah,
there's
'cause
there's some edits in the promo. Like at one point they do this big close up on Hogan, which they didn't do in the original broadcast, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if Nash did something obscene or if somebody threw something in the ring that was weird. But yeah, there was that close up of Hogan cutting the promo, which was not the original broadcast. So
The promos. So it's so funny with Mean Gene when he's like, I'm disappointed, like he's so mad, and he's he's trying to like keep his head turned so he doesn't get hit in the face with stuff. You can see Mean Gene's like he's trying to do the promo, but he's also trying to not get hit with stuff, and like Nash is like swatting stuff down.
Yeah, that's one of the funniest things is that Nash is swatting stuff down. It's like you people forgot he was a basketball player and that he's 7 feet tall. Because he at one point like Nash is like looking pissed off because I think they were pissed off that the guy jumped into the ring because like when you see that
there's like
footage,
8,000 security guys out there. How the fuck does a guy get in the ring?
Because they didn't
and
come down until after that happened.
Hall really stomps on the guy's head too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, he did.
deservedly so. But like Nash is like he's like knocking shit out of the air with this like look of disgust on his face and shit. But I mean there's so much great stuff, of course, in the promo. When Mean Gene says, "Look at all this crap in the ring," and Hogan probably ad libs because it couldn't have been in the script. Not that they would have ever scripted promos for Hogan anyway, but there's definitely no way that they knew people were going to throw trash in the ring. So the fact that he's able to say all of this crap in the ring represents these fans out here, and then goes into like the grievance, like for 2 years, I did everything for the charities, I did everything for the kids, and with the reception I got when I came out here, which like I just said was not overwhelming like it should have been. You fans can stick it, brother.
The promo was great. It was fantastic.
I
wish they wouldn't edit out the part where that guy gets stomped, because that should be in there. Because that's like, don't ever do this, fans.
That's the reason they edited it out, so as to not encourage people. That's like when like fans run onto the field during like pro sports games. Like they never.
That's like when the idiot tried to go on the Hall of Fame thing where Bret Hart got his butt whooped.
Yeah. So. But then it's like, so Okerlund finally, cuts it back to the announcers, and Schiavone just sounds, so downtrodden. He's like, okay, we're Bobby the Brain Heenan. We're Dusty Rhodes. We're all of us here at WCW. Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell. Straight to hell. I love the way Schiavone did it. And so the pay-per-view goes off the air, and I listened to, Schiavone has his own podcast now, but I listened to him being interviewed by somebody else, and he was talking about how there was like a lot of tension backstage that day because they, as the announcers, didn't know who the third man was. Like nobody really knew, I think, for probably except like Bischoff, Hogan, and the guys in the match. I don't think anybody else really knew. He said maybe Sullivan as the booker, or maybe one or two other people knew, but the announcers didn't know. He said he thought it could have been Sting. It could have been Bret Hart. There had been all these kind of rumors, again, about who the third man was. But he said that as soon as fans started throwing stuff in the ring, he said they knew that they hit a home run. He goes, we didn't know where they're like, we didn't know where it was going to go, but we knew we had done this right. And he said, so everybody backstage was high-fiving, and they're like, we did it. We pulled it off, So the match itself proper goes... I lost it. 16 minutes. Meltzer gave it 3 stars. Feels about right, especially for a match that technically doesn't have a finish.
Yeah.
Promo. The heel turn.
It did because when you come down to it, it was billed as like the hostile takeover. Well, the WCW guys lost. That's no matter how you look at it. Even if the pin wasn't official, the WCW guys lost. So yeah.
Yeah.
That match was okay. It wasn't anything special. The promo.
No, so that's it. It was about the story and the spectacle more so than the match.
Right. It was just like basically the similar thing I can tie between the two is like I said, Austin's promo saved the King of the Ring. The match wasn't great to me. The promo saved the whole pay-per-view because I don't think the pay-per-view was very good. So Hogan, the big turn in Hogan's promo saved the whole pay-per-view in my opinion because, like I said, I don't think this pay-per-view was very good.
No, so I was going to say I would give the whole pay-per-view, I would say about a C- because, again, it's very historically significant. There's one excellent match. There's one good match. And then the rest of it is like
C-, D+, C-.
There's a couple of things that are like but there's a lot of there's 3
stink shit.
There are 3 shit matches.
So I'll say it was going to be a D+, but because of the Hogan promo and stuff, I'll give it a C-. I'll give it a bump up for that.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, C- for me.
So, it just kind of goes to show that for both of these shows, again, they featured hugely historically significant moments, but neither company was capable of putting on a top-to-bottom excellent show. And that's to be expected. What the problem was that both companies put on several just bad matches.
I also thought, and this is just me, I'm not... Everybody has their own. I thought that the announcing in the WCW one was bad. I did not I listen to Tony Schiavone now. Like I feel like I'm watching AEW now, and AEW doesn't have a great announcing crew. I feel like I just went back in the time machine, and WCW had the same. Dusty was not great on this. Like Dusty was not, and I love Dusty Rhodes, and there were times where I don't think they had the right group of people together calling this pay-per-view. Schiavone's fine back then. I don't know if Heenan and Dusty were the right people to be with him. I think it was a bad mixing of people. I definitely think that the announcing on King of the Ring was better than the announcing on this. So
yeah, and I would agree with that. And this was even when Vince was in his era of being overly histrionic on the mic, with the way he would count like pin attempts and going to be like, oh, come on, that had to be 3, and, all that kind of stuff. But If it was just Vince and JR, it probably wouldn't have been as good. I don't think Vince and JR booth would have ever really worked. So it was good that Owen was there.
But
I think Owen helped.
But we did get a slobber knocker. We did get getting beat like a government mule out of JR, early JR on WWE.
Yes. We didn't get any. I don't think we got any internal bleeding.
No.
I mean, and again, this wasn't quite fully JR yet. Like he wasn't wearing a cowboy hat and everything like that yet. So, all right. So there's a couple other quick topics I wanted to address. But before that, I have another stumper question.
Oh boy.
Oh damn!
Let's make this one quick. Let's get our guesses on quick here with this one, guys.
Yeah.
So Bash at the Beach ran as a pay-per-view concept from 1994 through 2000. They did an event called Beach Blast before that, but I'm not counting those.
Yeah.
So this is Bash at the Beach, 1994 to 2000, a 7-year period. Who wrestled the most matches at Bash at the Beach?
Sting.
Okay.
Without even having to guess, I'd say Sting.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Hogan.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Flair.
Okay.
Wow.
Sting only wrestled at Bash at the Beach 3 times.
Really? Holy shit.
Well, you got to remember, like all of 1997, for example, he didn't wrestle.
True.
Yeah. There's
that
one there. Ric Flair wrestled 4 times.
Oh, you got one up on me.
Hulk Hogan wrestled 5 times.
Ooh,
If you don't count this event. You got to see what I'm saying? Well, the reason I'm saying this is this, because if you count Hogan as having wrestled at Bash at the Beach 96, then he actually wrestled the Bash at the Beach 6 times.
Somebody else must be at 6 then.
No, there's somebody else at 5.
Okay.
And that guy is Diamond Dallas Page.
I would give Page it.
Well, see, I think I would actually give it to Page too, because one of those 5 or 6 times that Hogan wrestled was when he put his foot on Jeff Jarrett's chest at Bash at the Beach 2000. Also known as his last appearance for WCW. So that's a story for another day, of course. But I just thought I'd whip out a quick stumper question for that too. Okay, so.
Good one. Good job, Joe. You kind of got it. So good job, Joe.
Yeah. All good guesses, and like all the kind of guesses that probably should be made if you're going to say like who did the most WCW this or that, Can one of you bring them up real quick?
Yep, I got them right here. So one of the other topics is, and we've already actually kind of touched on this, is offer comparisons of the 2 shows.
Okay, we pretty much done that throughout.
Yeah. Which show was more impactful? Which show was more impactful, both with and without historical hindsight?
Okay, so I'll just kind of go first. Just that. Without the benefit of historical hindsight, it's definitely Bash at the Beach, and the reason for that being is that Hogan turning heel was a seismic event. It's like that was a huge deal, and everybody who knew anything about wrestling knew that, because nobody's going to remember the fact when Hulk Hogan was a heel back in the WWF and then his early AWA days in like 1980 through 82. Nobody was going to remember that, even if they saw it, really. True. So that was definitely a seismic thing, and I think it also was a signal that, WCW, like they had been trading ratings victories back and forth a lot from the time Nitro debuted through Bash at the Beach. But I think this just provided a new level of interest for a lot of people, and I think everybody could kind of feel that right away. So without the benefit of hindsight, I would say it's Bash at the Beach. With the benefit of hindsight, knowing where Austin went and how big he got, I'm gonna cop out and say I think it is still kind of even, because WWF doesn't reclaim the victory from Nitro without Austin and the Austin versus Vince storyline. But WCW doesn't ever become WCW without the NWO storyline. So they each did the same thing, just at different times, at different intervals, and for different lengths. So that's my take.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, you pretty much said it, Pat. I mean,
so
it's pretty.
Yeah, it's just
in regards to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's just kind of fascinating to go back and look at these because, again, like I said, you see the difference in the production value between the two companies. Again, WWF might have been down from a lot of aspects, but their production was still top notch. WCW was still trying to figure out what they were doing in a lot of ways. But again, it's kind of funny in retrospect to think that Austin said Austin 316 before Hulk Hogan dropped the leg, because just to how it was like a slow burn for Austin to go to the top of the card to really get over, and also for them to realize that he was a baby face, because even though he was still a really very, very much dastardly hateable heel here, you could see people in the audience cheering for him.
I mean, you could, and you could definitely see. I noticed too, even though people are throwing shit in the ring, you could definitely see a bunch of people cheering for Hogan too. Like there's a lot of people in the crowd like cheering for Hogan when he's cutting the promo. So
it was funny. Yeah, if you look at the crowd that you can see behind Hogan and Nash and Hall, there's one guy, a really very large gentleman that's flipping him the bird constantly, that's got a backwards hat on, and then the guy right next to him keeps on putting his arms up. He's like, yeah, I'm like giving him the thumbs up the whole time. He's like, I knew it. He's got his shirt that he's got. I was like, what the hell? Like, you could see that like one guy's like, I fucking knew it. It was gonna be Hogan, and the other guy's fucking Hogan. God damn it, you bastard.
Well, and that kind of reflects what the difference was, because I mean, Hogan, from the moment he came into WCW, I don't think he was ever fully embraced, because he was always perceived as being the guy from up north and everything. So even though he was the baby face, I think people didn't really there was always a subset of people who were never going to like him in WCW no matter what. But also his shtick he'd been doing it for a decade. So, yeah, he had done it for a decade, so it had run its course. And it's like, if you go back and watch some of these Nitros from early '96, when him and Savage are constantly fighting either the Horsemen and or the Dungeon of Doom, he's still doing the same stuff, and you could see the fans turning on him. So it's like, supposedly Bischoff said that when he first went to Hogan's house and pitched the idea of him turning heel, Hogan literally walked him out of his house, saying something like, "Till you've walked a mile in my red and yellow boots, you'll just never know." So like, he felt like he had an obligation to be the good guy and everything. Yeah. But then I think there was the part of him that was always like a shrewd businessman and politician, where he saw that things were changing. And I think he saw the responses that Hall and Nash were getting when they came in, and he probably took a long look in the mirror and said, maybe I do need to change. Which, when he's been doing it for that long, I think you do have to give him some credit for being willing to do it, because it could have backfired. People might have said, oh no, I don't want to see Hulk Hogan as a bad guy. Who the hell knew? But, I mean, because it never would have worked in WWF, as we saw when he wrestled The Rock at WrestleMania. But it worked brilliantly in WCW, because, again, he was always perceived as being that enemy guy. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that then brings us to Mount Rushmore, correct, gentlemen?
Yes,
sure does.
All right. Awesome. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. This has been a longer episode, and if you caught part 1 and then you changed to part 2, you got to hear both sides of the episode and got to hear the breakdown of both pay-per-views. So let's get on to Mount Rushmore. And Mount Rushmore is going to be our favorite match from either of those pay-per-views. So I'll go with mine so it doesn't get stolen by anybody, because mine was stolen last time we did Mount Rushmore.
The funny thing is, there's really only about 4 or 5 candidates combined from those shows.
So I am actually going to go with my favorite match. Was the Mankind Undertaker match. That was my favorite match, because it was because it was still a relatively young Undertaker gimmick. Still, it wasn't too old, and Mankind was really young. He was, he'd been in the WWE, but it was really early stages of the Mankind incarnation. So, and getting to see those guys really work, from top to bottom, I really thought the matches were wrestling matches and not big guy matches with gimmicks. So being able to see that match and see those guys work like that's why that's my favorite match. All right.
And just real quick, just to say, those guys technically really were still young. Both guys were only age 31 for that match.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
So I won't kick it to Darth Pat since I took his match to start off everything with. I'll give him a chance to recover there, and I'll kick it over to AJ.
I'm taking Bulldog and Michaels. So if Michaels is in a match and I get to pick him, I'm taking it. So like that match was the best match I saw in either show. So yeah. Michaels was like, that's when Michaels was like, even though he was a dick at this point in time, Michaels was like, he knew he was better than everybody in WWE at that point. Like he knew he was going to go out and put on the best match. I think I was watching WWE at the time. I knew he was going to steal the show even back then. And like we said earlier, Bulldog was pretty good as long as he was in the ring with somebody that was like a ring general. Bulldog usually excelled in those situations too. So that was my favorite match on either show. So I felt like there weren't a lot of matches to pick from the other show anyway. So
yeah, and like you said, it's like, say what you will about Michaels the human being from that time, because we know he was a dick, but Michaels the worker at that time was probably at the top of his game.
He was.
So, yeah. He probably could not have a bad match with anybody at that point. I mean,
this was like, what is this, 2 months after the Iron Man match, though, right?
Yep.
And then he proceeds to go to SummerSlam and have a really good match with Vader, too. So
he had a good match with Diesel at the Good Friends, Better Enemies. He'd have that really hard-hitting match with Mankind at Mind Games after SummerSlam. So he put on a series of great matches. And the ironic thing is, I think a lot of people said this was like WWE was technically – I think Diesel was actually like the lowest drawn champion of all time. But it's like this year for when Michaels was champion couldn't have been much better, and that's because WCW started rocketing upward. But again, Michaels put on a series of phenomenal matches and with different guys. We just mentioned Brett, Diesel, Bulldog, Vader, Mankind. So it's like he's the common denominator.
Yeah. All right, Theo, favorite match.
This is easy for me.
I know what he's picking. I knew it. Yeah, I knew it.
I couldn't even hear it.
Sorry.
I picked the Mysterio versus Psychosis. That's just, I was always into the cruiserweights, hence another reason why I watched TNA Impact back in the day, the X Division. Similar concept, different guys. But that's kind of like, I liked that wrestling at the time. I liked the cruiserweights, liked the luchas. Started watching, trying to find more stuff for, Mexican wrestling in regards to that. And they put on a great show. Those guys could definitely go. I've always liked both of them. So that's my pick. Nothing crazy about it.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right. It was funny when I was trying to put in Rey Mysterio because, I got to go back and make sure we do these right to match. Put in Master Oil. Fixed it to Master Oil. I was like, no, that's supposed to be Mysterio.
Well, there's a bit of a trick too with Mysterio's name because it's been spelled differently depending upon which company he's in.
Yes.
Yes.
Like when it's WCW Rey Mysterio, it's Mysterio, and when it's WWE Rey Mysterio, it's Mysterio. So it's. Psychosis is like that too. I think his name is spelled differently depending upon which company he's working for.
Joe's match would have been my second choice. So.
Yeah, right, I mean, like I said, that was the best rated match according to Meltzer from either show, with the Bulldog Shawn match not being very far after it. Well, because Jeremy took Mankind, Undertaker, which I was kind of going as like a safe pick, not thinking that either any of you guys were going to take it, I'll go with the Hostile Takeover match. It's obviously the historical significance outweighs the actual work rate or anything like that in the match itself, but it was still compelling. It was still really the only match where the crowd was pretty hot for like the entirety of the match. And you could actually make that argument, I think, for any of the matches over on the King of the Ring as well. I don't think like the crowd was up for like the entire Michaels Bulldog match because it was long. So I'll go with the Outsiders and Hogan against Savage, Sting, Luger, just again because It sent us off to the races for real in the Monday Night War.
Absolutely.
Yes, it did.
All right. So just to recap, our goodness gracious, it's getting late. It's a late night. Our Mount Rushmore of favorite matches from either Bash at the Beach 96 or King of the Ring 96 is Mankind versus The Undertaker, British Bulldog versus Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis, and The Outsiders versus Macho Man, Lex Luger, and Sting. A great Mount Rushmore, fun Mount Rushmore. And thank you guys, everybody's watching, for tuning into our first two-parter podcast because of just the length of this. It ended up being just about 3 hours and some odd minutes to get through both pay-per-views, but that's why we split this into a two-parter for you guys. But thank you for tuning in. Enjoy, and we will be back next week with... Help me out. I forgot what the hell we're talking about next week.
I did
To be
too.
determined.
Oh, to be determined. So we don't even know what we're going to talk about next week. So that's why I forgot, because there was nothing yet. So until, what's that?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay. Well, until next week, we'll see you on the next episode.